Beyond us all being able to see what's happening in Gaza with our own eyes, we can also just listen to the Israeli government themselves. And they are not shy about telling us that over and over and over again as their literal justification for committing genocide in front of all of our eyes.
So Ian Carroll recently launched an unambiguous attack on Israel for its genocide in Gaza. And in this video, he explains what's at the root of that and what are the implications for the US because of that. He also touches upon why Israel is losing its propaganda war right now as it tries to claim that there's nothing to see here and it's actually not a starvation campaign. So let's get into it. Let's get his take on it. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Last week, also saw a number of high-profile whistleblowers go viral over accusations about the current situation in Gaza. The most inflammatory one is Green Beret Anthony Aguilar, who, after sitting down with Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen, has started doing the rounds on all the biggest podcasts, including Tucker and Breaking Points, and I'm sure many more to come. You should listen to his testimony for yourself in its entirety, but he tells his firsthand accounts of how horrific the aid distribution plan is and how it is explicitly designed to ethnically cleanse Palestinians out of Gaza by moving them all to the south through active combat operations where they are being shot and killed just to receive what scraps of aid are making it in. He tells one particularly heart-wrenching story about a 5-year-old boy who kissed his hand with gratitude just minutes before being shot dead by either IDF or American contractors. He doesn't know which.
Guys, viewer discretion advised. This is just heartbreaking. It was for me anyways. I agree. Watch that full interview if you haven't, but let's get into it. It's horrific, but this is what's playing out, and the U.S. is financing it.
He is just one more in a long line of whistleblowers that have made it abundantly clear what is really going on over there. We're just going to watch a very short clip of it now. You can go and find the whole clip for yourself.
A Palestinian man had picked up some children to let them step on his shoulders to get onto a berm because they were being crushed in the crowd. Site 2 is very small, smallest of all 4 sites. And these children are being crushed, and he picked them up there and put them up on the berm. And the Israeli Defense Forces Liaison Officer in the main control center with us comes up to the screen that I'm watching and he says, "Tell your men to get them down." I was like, "We got this under control." I was like, "I know they know what they're doing. No, they're children. Let's calm down. Mm-hmm. Get them down now or I will." Well, there's no IDF on the site. So I didn't take it as much more than just being, bombastic and like, okay, like, hey, we got this. He leaves and goes to his desk in the operations center and he gets on the radio and he speaks something on the radio. It was in Hebrew. I don't speak Hebrew. One of the contractors that was there was American that did speak Hebrew, and he notifies me. He said, "Hey, he just told the snipers at the IDF position, because the site number 2 is co-located with an Israeli base." Mm-hmm. He said, he just told the snipers to take these kids out. I was like, "On the radio?" He's like, "Yeah." This lieutenant colonel then comes back up and he says, "Get them down." And I look at him and I say, "Did you just call on the radio and tell your men to shoot them?" And he said, "I'm going to take care of this if you don't." I said, "You are not going to shoot. You are not going to shoot children. You're also not going to shoot because if your men miss, you're going to hit others. You're not going to shoot." Thank God we didn't come to the conclusion of figuring out whether he would or not, because the children jumped down and ran off of the site. They didn't want to be there. They were unarmed. They didn't have shoes. One wasn't even wearing a shirt. They were starving. The chief operations officer for Safe Reach Solutions, our higher headquarters, so to speak, in the contract, beckoned me outside with him, and he looked at me in the face and he said, "Never say no to the client."
It's just disgusting, and people will call these sorts of things isolated incidents, but the truth is what he's talking about has happened at many locations with many Palestinians. About 1,300 have died in the 3 months where there is this aid embargo, where they're setting up these aid stations. There are 4 of them, though, as Ian and he's acknowledged, most of the Palestinians have been pushed into the south of Gaza. But as they're seeking, refuge from their shelters to get aid, they're lining up in these aid lines, and the IDF has killed many of them. The Israeli government hasn't even denied this in several cases because it's impossible to deny. They've gotten this on film. And, these sorts of atrocities are widespread. This is not just all crisis acting. This guy's a Green Beret with high honors that was acting as a defense contractor. I'm glad he's coming forward. I'm hoping others come forward to share the truth. But there are atrocities going on in Gaza that are unimaginable as my criminal government funds another criminal government in the Middle East that they dare to say is our greatest ally in the Middle East. Yet it does these things without any kind of denunciation, without the United States or its government threatening to withhold aid if you continue this? Of course not, because of the grip that the Apac and Israel lobby has on our elected officials and our deep state and our president, I'm sorry to say.
And I asked him, I was like, I didn't know the client was in there. Who's here? Did Johnny Moore come to visit?
Right.
And he said, no, the IDF. I was like, the IDF are our client? He said, yes, we work for them. A light bulb went off in my head because...
Yeah. The IDF is the client. The American military is apparently over there working for the IDF. Not the other way around.
Yeah, under any traditional relationship, especially between allies, the pusher and the mover, which is the United States in terms of the financing, moving in $20 billion into Israel last year, after October 7th, by the way, I think it's on track to do something like that again, has apparently no leverage over this. There's, no problems with this, nothing to see here. And Netanyahu is claiming that the starvation campaign is propaganda and that there isn't a genocide, despite invoking Amalek in his first speech when he talked about the reprisal that would happen for October 7th. Well, Amalek is from the Bible. Those are descendants of Esau that after Exodus, they were adversarial toward the ancient Jews. And because of that, they got wiped off the face of the mat. It wasn't just a segment of people that were terrorists in the Amalekites. He invoked Amalek as reason why this reprisal had to be grand. It had to be thorough. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that happen under the quest for the Greater Israel Project, the idea that Israel will expand beyond its borders, as Israel flirts with, even in mainstream coverage, they're saying this, annexing Gaza right now as it tries to expand West Bank settlements in Syria and Lebanon.
One of the other whistleblowers that's making the rounds right now, I guess you could say, is Irish surgeon Dr. Morgan McGonigal. He gave similar testimony to the Irish Times, saying that, quote, even though people are dying from the war and from the blasts and from crush injuries from the buildings and from gunshot wounds, we are now in a situation where we are seeing starvation in this day and age. Man-made starvation. The difference is Ukraine is one military versus another military, for want of a better word. The narrative is like a proper war, if there's such a choice of word. Gaza is a big army against civilians. But that's all lies, says Charlie Kirk, who freed up the back of his throat for long enough to tell us that Israel is not starving Gaza.
Oh yeah, just deny what you're seeing, call them all crisis actors, just say Israel has a right to defend itself. Let's see how he justifies it.
Check it out.
And I hate being propagandized. And this weekend, there was an all-out propaganda campaign trying to make it seem as if Israel is intentionally starving the people of Gaza. I hate being lied to. Especially by the media networks. They lied to us about COVID. They lied to us about the vaccines. They lied to us about open borders. They lied to us Hunter Biden laptop. Joining us now is Rabbi Walicki, a great friend, and thank you so much for defending.
Yeah, anyways, that's all we can handle of Charlie right now.
Yeah, it is. And, what makes you think that if Israel is willing to just bomb buildings, huge sections of buildings in major cities like Rafah, taking down something like 80% of the buildings in that area and kill children and then just say, oh, it was human shields. They're just human shields. That's Hamas's fault that we did that, which, by the way, is an excuse that wouldn't fly in any Western country that has any sort of dignity or morality when it comes to, hey, if criminals take school children into a fire department, you're not just going to be able to drop bombs on that fire department. What makes you think a government that does that is not willing to starve a populace? Because we've seen what's happening. These videos coming out of these malnutrition these malnourished children, they can't all be crisis actors. I'm sorry to say, Charlie. And I don't care how much money you're taking from Zionist lobbies and Zionist contractors. That's just the truth. You don't get starving children and starving adults where you can see their skeletons and just say, hey, that's just propaganda. We know better.
You get the idea. Aside from the fact that Israel blocked all aid and food from entering Gaza for 78 days straight earlier this year, and are now letting in just a fraction of what would be needed to feed the population, Charlie, why are we listening to this talking pair of dentures when we can just see what's happening with our own eyes? Yeah. So, that's what a food distribution center looks like, apparently. One of just 4 in the entire territory. And this video didn't even include the IDF and American contractors doing crowd control with live ammunition, as Aguilar described just a moment ago.
That's right. IDF is doing these kind of operations and are shooting Palestinians that wait in line. We know that. Even mainstream coverage is covering that. You can see like the New York Times and Yahoo covering that at this point. It also doesn't just have... it really doesn't negate the idea, too, that the United States has been in the business of suppressing aid getting in. One of the reasons why that the U.S. bombed Yemen was because the Houthis, the government in Yemen, that's in control of that government, by the way, after a long civil war that the U.S. participated in, by the way, tried to send aid to the Palestinians. They were one of the few groups in the region that did, and Israel didn't like that very much, and that's why Big Daddy Netanyahu, persuaded Trump. He wasn't the only one. The neocons loved this idea. Mike Waltz and Marco Rubio clearly loved this idea to bomb Yemen throughout March, which the U.S. did, and the U.S. has been involved in a starvation blockade of Yemen, too, for over 10 years. That was mostly started during Obama. But the U.S. is involved in this too, and they have experience in these starvation campaigns. The U.S. stands by Israel despite all this, and we're just supposed to look the other way like it's not happening.
But beyond us all being able to see what's happening in Gaza with our own eyes, beyond the endless stream of videos of murdered children, we can also just listen to the Israeli government themselves. They are not shy about what they are doing. This is Itamar Ben-Gvir, one of the most vile demons on planet Earth today, and he is the Israeli Minister of National Security. Let's see what he thinks of sending food aid into Gaza.
במחטף לחדש את הסיוע לכל רחבי הרצועה היא טעות קשה וחמורה. צריך להגיד את האמת לציבור במדינת ישראל. הסיוע הזה שמגיע לכל רחבי הרצועה יגיע גם לידיים של החמאס. זו הסיבה שסירבו לבקשתי להצבעה, זו הסיבה שידעו שיש לי רוב להפיל את ההצבעה הזאת. כל החודשים האחרונים התנגדתי התנגדות חמורה להכניס הומניטרי לרצועת עזה. צריך להסביר לנשיא טראמפ שההומניטרי הזה מסכן את חיי החיילים שלנו. אסור לתת חמצן לאויבים.
But we found out this week that even Israel has a line. But Randy Fine apparently couldn't see it past the bulge of his massive gut as he walked right past it when he recently suggested that maybe what we should do is drop nuclear weapons on all these starving children.
Because of course he did. That's Randy Fine, the so-called Hebrew hammer, who Max Blumenthal, I think, rightly called the Hebrew scammer in front of his face. But yeah, just listen to Ben-Gvir there talk about that. There can't be any aid flowing into Gaza at all because some of it might get into Hamas's hands. Hamas is not a serious fighting force anymore. Even by liberal estimates, they have something like 12,000 or maybe 13,000 members. They have about 50 hostages, while Israel has something like 3,300 right now, and we still hear this propaganda. If Hamas releases the hostages, this will all come to an end, despite the fact that it clearly won't. It hasn't, and they tried that. They got into a ceasefire where there was a hostage swap arrangement that Israel violated, not Hamas, and we're back to the fighting resuming. You know, Israel Katz, the defense minister, who is really an offense minister when it comes to Gaza, also talks about how Rafah should be a concentration zone. You know, they use terms like transfer and relocation, but this is a concentration camp. These people are openly talking about this. This is when there's something like 2 million people in Gaza outside of the ones that Israel's already killed, maybe upwards of 200,000 at this point, depending on the stats that you listen to. And he's worried about aid getting into that fractional part that might be Hamas. It's so absurd. So I guess they should just starve the whole time while you bomb their cities, just destroy their buildings, and starve their children. That's essentially what Ben-Gvir was saying.
A sitting American congressman. Here, take a listen.
We nuked the Japanese twice in order to get unconditional surrender. That needs to be the same here. There is something deeply, deeply wrong with this culture, and it needs to be defeated.
We heard in Brooks.
We nuked the Japanese twice in order to get unconditional.
Yeah.
You can't even make it up. I mean, these people are among the most vile imaginable that support this kind of nonsense and this total destruction of the civilian populace. You know, when's he gonna just boast about the firebombing campaign in Germany, too? Why don't you talk about all the innocents that were lost there? Yeah, that's fruitless. It's senseless. It's vile. I don't want my taxpayer money anywhere near that, but too bad, because my complicit and criminal government is involved in all of it.
So, APAC has committed to a lot of retarded PR strategies since October 7th. But Mr. Fine went too far, apparently even for them. They didn't make a big fuss of it, but several reporters noticed that his name was quietly removed from their list of endorsed candidates. Bad look to have this fat ogre out here speaking so openly about how Israel feels about Gaza and the innocent children trapped there. Because make no mistake, this is how Israel actually feels. This March...
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, if APAC has that kind of standard, like, that's telling. If even APAC's willing to drop you for your absurd comments, like it seems that they did in terms of this, that is so telling, beyond imagination. And APAC is a vile force in American politics. It should have to register under FARA because it is a foreign lobby, and they basically lay claim to something like 400 representatives in Congress that it essentially has control over on votes relating to Israel. They openly boast about that. And they openly throw money at primarying candidates that don't, like Thomas Massie, who has, in his last primary, about $400,000 just thrown at that one congressional seat that he occupied because he dares to say, I won't accept any foreign money, including that of APAC. And that's why he's a hero. That's why we like Marjorie Taylor Greene, that's talked about this often lately too, how she thinks that APAC is backward and it should have to register under FARA. But that's exactly right. I think Max Blumenthal was right about Randy Fine when he called him the Hebrew scammer. That's what he is, and that's what he does. APAC didn't make a big fuss about that, and you know, they didn't make a big declaration, hey, we're dropping Fine, but it is telling when APAC drops you like that. It's incredible.
A poll of Israeli citizens conducted by Penn State found that 82% of Israelis support expelling all Palestinians from Gaza and taking the land for themselves, and that 65% of Israelis believe in Amalek and the commandment to exterminate it, meaning the Palestinians are vermin that should be exterminated. The study also found that younger Israelis are even more radical and bloodthirsty than older ones, with 58% saying that they support giving Gaza the Jericho treatment. And after all, what do you expect from a religion that is based on the core doctrine that they are God's chosen people and that all other people are lesser.
All right, so I'm going to challenge him a little bit here. Not all Jews believe that, thankfully. A lot of Israel's critics certainly don't believe that, including a lot of the Jewish critics of Israel. So I don't buy into that at all. There are Orthodox Jews that do believe that. That's kind of inherent in some forms of Orthodox Judaism, I think. But at the same time, you know, this is vile. I really hope that there are more dissidents than they are purporting in Israel itself questioning these narratives. But the biggest, you know, thing of defense I could even say is this is a propagandized people, not unlike the US was after the days of 9/11, when they told us that, you know, if you're not with us in invading Afghanistan, occupying it, invading Iraq, passing the Patriot Act, passing DHS, expanding FISA, expanding the surveillance state, you're with them. You're the enemy. You are the terrorists. You've chosen the side of Hamas. They've gotten the same kind of propaganda like Americans have for years and years and years under this Likud government and under the right-wing Zionists in the government that control it, that support the clean break strategy, which was to get away from Oslo and the idea that there would be a Palestinian state, and they're propagandized. I'm not giving them any out on this whatsoever, or the people that support this. I'm just saying that this is a people held captive by a grand propaganda machine, and I hope the ones within that buck the trend can sow the truth and get away from this thing. But that's all my 2 cents here, but I do not put this on the religion or the ethnicity whatsoever. There are terrible people, you know, in the United States that have those same views that aren't Jewish at all. Many of them are dispensationalist Christians that believe that aid to Israel will kind of fast track the second coming, and that, you know, the Jews had to be in control of Israel for that to happen, and I think that's nonsense too. I'm a Christian, but I think that is something I just wanted to say here.
Like, weren't we all taught in grade school the atrocity of the Atlantic slave trade and how perceiving other races as less than fully human justified some of the most heinous atrocities of recent history? Isn't that the same thing that we're told was wrong with Nazi ideology and white supremacy today? That when one race sees themselves as superior to all others, they are the embodiment of evil, and nearly any act is justified to stop them and crush that ideology out of existence? Well, as far as I can tell, Judaism, or at least the Zionist variety of it, is built on the principle that they are God's chosen people. And they are not shy about telling us that over and over and over again as their literal justification for committing genocide in front of all of our eyes.
Yeah, absolutely right. The Zionist branch of it is committed to that. It's not all of Judaism, of course. I'm glad he makes that distinction. But yes, no matter who it is doing it, no matter where they are in the world, no matter how closely aligned they are with the U.S. government, it's not acceptable to wipe out another people, whole or part. You know, the definition of genocide is trying to do away with an ethnic, national, or religious group in whole or in part through governmental policies. That's exactly what Israel's doing in Gaza. I have yet to see a convincing or compelling challenge to that, really, but to me, you know, the bigger question is, should the U.S. be involved? And my answer is a clairvoyant and emphatic no, absolutely not. It's a disaster that the U.S. bankrolls this and doesn't challenge it at all. It would be the easiest thing if they were truly our greatest ally in the Middle East to threaten to withhold aid and funding over this, especially when last week there was more aid given to Israel, and Marjorie Taylor Greene tried to create an amendment in the House that would have prohibited $500 million worth of additional funding that even people like AOC voted against. But you do have some people standing up and waking up, even on the right. The distant left has been so great on issues related to non-interventionism in Israel for a long time, but you see Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens talking about this. You see people like Dave Smith talking about this and really opening up some minds, and a lot of it's unavoidable. We don't live in an age where the legacy media controls everything and they can just prohibit us from seeing images coming out of Gaza, which are flowing through social platforms like TikTok, which, by the way, they're trying to ban for that reason, by the way. They just about did it, and maybe they ultimately will succeed. But Americans just can't turn a blind eye anymore. It's not possible to get away from this thing. So this was a great video. I thought Ian's coverage was perfect. Only small amounts nuance of disagreement there, but I think he's mostly on the right track that, yeah, in many ways, Zionism is antithetical to the notion that we should all be under the same standard, that there should be no special carve-outs for particular ethnicities, any particular religions, any particular nationalities, etc. And that's the big disaster in all this. And a lot of conservatives saw that when it came to like liberal wokeism, but doesn't see it when it comes to the culture war that's raging on to give, you know, special carve-outs to this vile criminal Israeli regime that deserves to go down, if you're asking me. So that's what I'll say about it. Let me know down below, do you agree with Ian Carroll on this? Is there anything more to the Gazan starvation campaign you want to add? Do you think there's any benefit to aid to Israel in the United States? Let me know in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also subscribe to Ian. He is awesome. I love his videos. He's a great content creator that deserves more viewers. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can support the channel, which I'll really appreciate. And in return, I'll give you access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. Until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.